Hey, Growth Seekers, you're listening to the Limitless Man podcast. And today,
Today we're taking a deep dive into Getting Things Done by David Allen. You know, as someone who's always striving for growth, you're probably no stranger to that feeling of being pulled in a million different directions.
right, so many goals,
Yeah.
so many tasks, and just not enough time. So, we're going to explore how this book can really be your secret weapon for not only conquering that overwhelm, but also for actually achieving all those ambitious goals you have.
Yeah, what's really cool about Getting Things Done, or GTD as it's often called, is that it's not just like a simple productivity system. It's really more like a philosophy. It's a whole way of thinking about how we manage that constant influx of stuff in our lives, so that we can actually free our minds up to focus on what really matters.
Okay, so let's break this down a little bit. Imagine if you could have what David Allen calls a mind like water. Calm, clear, ready to respond to absolutely anything. It's kind of the ultimate goal here, right?
Absolutely. And GTD is like the roadmap to get there. It's a 5-step process: capture, clarify, organize, reflect, and engage. And each step kind of builds upon the last one. And it creates the system for managing all of our commitments and achieving what David Allen calls stress-free productivity.
Stress-free productivity.
Yeah.
That's something I think we can all get behind, especially as growth seekers. So let's start with that first step, capture. What does it actually mean to capture everything?
So think of it this way. Every to-do you have, every little brilliant idea, any little nagging reminder, it's all taking up space in your mind right now. And that mental clutter, it creates stress and makes it harder for you to actually focus. So capturing is about getting all of that stuff out of your head and into a trusted system.
So we're having like a physical system,
Yeah.
like a notebook or an app, something tangible.
Exactly. The key is to have a system that you personally trust, a place where you can consistently offload all of those thoughts and commitments, so they're not just swirling around in your head. It could be as simple as a notebook. It could be as sophisticated as some kind of project management software. The actual medium isn't as important as the act of externalizing those thoughts.
Okay, that makes sense. It's almost like decluttering your mind in a way,
Yeah.
giving your brain permission to relax. So once we've captured everything, then we move on to clarify, right?
Precisely. Now it's time to go through and process each of those items that you captured. We're not actually talking about taking action yet. We're just trying to understand what each item means and what, if anything, needs to be done about it.
I think this is where a lot of us get stuck. We have all these vague to-dos floating around, but we never really break them down into actual actionable steps.
You're absolutely right. This is where the power of asking, what's the next action, comes in. So, for example, let's say you have an item that says launch online course. That can feel like a really big and overwhelming task. But by asking what's the next action, you might realize it's something as simple as research online course platforms or outline the course content.
Wow, that's a great example. Just by defining that next action, it suddenly feels so much less daunting
Yeah.
and so much more achievable. Okay, so we've captured, we've clarified. What's next on this GTD journey?
Now it's time to organize.
Okay.
And this is where you're going to take those clarified items and you're going to put them in the right places. So that could be your calendar, your next action lists, your project plans, whatever it is. The goal here is to create a system that allows you to easily access and act on all of the information that you've captured and clarified.
So it's all about creating a structure, a system that works for you. Because I think a lot of people hear organize, and they immediately feel overwhelmed.
That's a really important point. It's not about creating some rigid, complex system that becomes another source of stress in your life. It's about finding a system that feels natural and intuitive for you. Maybe you're a very digital person and you love using apps, or maybe you prefer good old-fashioned pen and paper. The key is to experiment and find what works best for your own personal style and needs.
Okay, I'm getting this. Capture, clarify, organize. We're building a system for managing all of our commitments. But how do we make sure this stays relevant? And it doesn't just become another to-do list graveyard.
That's where the next step, reflect, comes in. And a key part of that reflection is the weekly review. And this is a dedicated time that you set aside each week to step back from that day-to-day grind, get clear on your commitments, and ensure that your system is actually still serving you.
I have to admit, the idea of a weekly review sounds a little daunting to me. What does that actually look like in practice?
It's simpler than you might think. It's about dedicating a block of time each week to review your calendars, your lists, your projects, and asking yourself, what have I accomplished? What needs to be updated? Are there any new commitments that I need to capture? It's a chance to get clear, get current, and get creative.
So it's like hitting the reset button on your whole system, making sure it's aligned with your current reality and your goals. That sounds incredibly liberating, but also still a bit daunting. How do you recommend approaching that?
The key is to make it a habit. Block out a specific time each week, maybe Sunday evening, Monday morning, and just treat it as a non-negotiable appointment with yourself. You can start by simply reviewing your calendars and your next action lists, and then gradually incorporate other elements of your system as you get more comfortable with the process.
This is so helpful. I'm starting to see how that weekly review can be such a powerful tool for staying on top of things and preventing that feeling of overwhelm. But we've only talked about 4 steps so far. What's the final piece of the GTD puzzle?
The final step is engage. And this is where you actually take action based on your context and your available resources. So you're looking at your list, you're looking at your calendar, the demands of the moment, and you're deciding what makes the most sense to do right now.
So it's not just about mindlessly working through a to-do list, it's about making conscious choices about how we spend our time and energy.
Exactly. It's about becoming more mindful and intentional in our actions. And GTD gives us the framework to make those choices, to decide what's truly important, and to delegate or defer the rest.
This is so insightful. I'm already starting to imagine how I can apply these principles to my own life. But I know a lot of growth seekers, myself included, struggle with procrastination.
Yeah.
How does GTD address that?
That's a great question. And it's something that David Allen explores in detail in the book. He argues that procrastination often stems from a lack of clarity about that next action. Our minds naturally resist taking action when we're faced with those big, vague tasks.
So that feeling of overwhelm and resistance we experience when we think about a task could be because we haven't clearly defined what that next step needs to be.
Precisely. And that's where the power of asking what's the next action comes in. When we break those big tasks down into concrete, actionable steps, our minds can relax, and we're much more likely to take action.
This is such a game changer. It's like removing the mental roadblocks that are preventing us from moving forward.
Exactly. GTD empowers us to overcome that procrastination and achieve those goals that are so important to us.
This has been incredibly eye-opening. I'm starting to see how GTD can be such a transformative tool, not just for getting things done, but for living a more intentional and fulfilling life. But before we wrap up this first part, I'd like to dive a little deeper into this idea of unnatural planning. It sounds like a bit of a paradox. How can planning be unnatural?
It's a great question. And it might surprise you to learn that our minds are actually naturally wired to plan.
I'm intrigued. Give me an example. When do we do this unconscious planning?
Think about something as simple as planning a dinner party. You're unconsciously considering the menu, the guest list, the timing, potential challenges. Your mind is already engaged in a planning process.
Wow, you're right. I've never thought about it that way. But if we're already natural planners, why do we need this unnatural approach?
Because when it comes to more complex projects and areas of our lives, our natural planning tendencies can become a little haphazard and unreliable. We might start with good intentions, but then get bogged down in the details or lose sight of the bigger picture. So unnatural planning is about taking those intuitive planning processes and making them more deliberate and systematic.
Okay, I'm starting to see the distinction here. So what does that unnatural planning look like in the GTD world?
It's about consciously applying the 5 phases of natural planning: purpose, principles, vision outcome, brainstorming, and organizing.
So it's like taking those intuitive planning processes and making them more deliberate and systematic.
Exactly. And it all starts with defining our purpose. Why are we doing this project? What are we hoping to achieve?
So we're connecting those actions to a larger goal, just like we talked about earlier with the horizons of focus.
Precisely. And once we're clear on our purpose, we can define our principles. What are the guiding values and standards that will inform our actions?
So this is about setting boundaries, defining what we're willing to do and not willing to do.
Exactly. It's about aligning our actions with our values.
I love it. So we've got purpose, principles. What's next in this unnatural planning process?
We move on to vision outcome. What does success look like for this project? How will we know we've achieved it?
So we're getting clear on the specific results we want to see.
Exactly. And once we have that vision in mind, we can move on to brainstorming, generating ideas, exploring different options, gathering all the information we need.
So this is where we let our creativity flow and tap into those aha moments.
Precisely. And finally, we move on to organizing, taking all of those ideas and insights and structuring them in a way that allows us to take action.
So we're creating a plan, outlining the steps we need to take, Assigning responsibilities, setting deadlines.
Exactly. We're moving from that fuzzy, intuitive planning to a more concrete and actionable approach.
This is so helpful. I'm already starting to see how I can apply this to my own projects. So we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've explored the core principles of GTD, that 5-step process, the importance of that weekly review, and even touched on the concept of unnatural planning in the next part. I'd love to hear your 5 daily tips for implementing GTD and explore how we can use it to conquer procrastination and achieve those ambitious goals.
Absolutely. We'll dive into those practical tips and see how you can start incorporating GTD into your life today. Stay tuned, Growth Seekers. All right, so we're back and ready for those 5 daily tips to make GTD a reality in your life, right?
Absolutely. I'm already feeling inspired to put all of this into action. But as a growth seeker, I always want actionable advice. So where do we start?
Well, let's start by acknowledging that implementing any new system can feel a bit overwhelming at first, right? Don't try to do everything at once. Instead, focus on building small, consistent habits over time.
I love that advice. It's all about those small wins, building that momentum over time. So what's the first daily habit we should cultivate?
Tip number 1, consistently remember that trusted system we talked about in part 1. Make it a habit to capture everything that comes to mind throughout the day.
Okay, so we're not just talking about to-dos here. It could be ideas, inspirations, anything that takes up mental space.
Exactly. The key is to get it out of your head and into your system. Don't rely on your memory. It's not designed for that. Instead, trust your system, carry a notebook, use a voice recording app, whatever works for you. Make capturing a reflex a natural part of your day.
Got to capture consistently. What's tip number 2?
Define your next actions. This is where the rubber meets the road. Remember, those big goals and projects can feel paralyzing. Break them down into smaller, actionable steps.
So instead of write a book, my next action might be brainstorm chapter titles or research potential publishers.
That's it. It's about making it so simple you can't say no. What's fascinating is that once you define that next action, it's much easier to overcome procrastination. You've eliminated that mental barrier of figuring out where to start.
And that ties in perfectly with the growth mindset, right?
Yeah.
Taking action, no matter how small, is crucial for progress. Okay, I'm ready for tip number 3.
This one is all about context. When you're choosing your next action, consider your context. What can you realistically accomplish given your current location, energy levels, and available time?
So if I'm stuck in traffic, I'm probably not going to tackle that big presentation, but I could brainstorm ideas or listen to a podcast related to the topic.
Exactly. It's about being strategic. Maybe you have a list of tasks that require a computer, another for phone calls, and one for errands. This allows you to maximize your time and be productive even in those small pockets of your day.
I love this. It's about working smarter, not harder, and I bet this helps reduce that feeling of overwhelm too. Okay, what's tip number 4?
Embrace the 2-minute rule. If you can complete a task in 2 minutes or less, do it right away. This will prevent small tasks from piling up and becoming a source of stress.
That's brilliant. I can see how this would make a huge difference in keeping my inbox clear, my workspace tidy. Those little things can really add up.
What's fascinating is how this simple rule shifts your mindset. You're no longer delaying those small tasks, you're proactively tackling them. It's a small win that creates a sense of momentum.
Okay, I'm ready for the final tip. Tip number 5. What is it?
And each day with a review, take a few minutes each evening to review your progress and plan for the next day. This will help you feel more in control and set you up for success.
I love that it's like creating a sense of closure for the day and paving the way for a productive tomorrow. So those are the 5 daily tips. Capture consistently, define your next actions, consider your context, embrace the 2-minute rule, and end each day with a review.
Right, these are the building blocks of a successful GTD practice. They're simple yet powerful, and they can transform the way you approach your work and your life.
I'm feeling so energized to put all of this into action. But we've talked a lot about the practical aspects of GTD. I'd love to explore the bigger picture for a moment. How does this all connect to the idea of horizons of focus that you mentioned earlier?
The horizons of focus. That's where GTD goes beyond just managing tasks and starts to become a framework for aligning your actions with your larger goals and purpose.
Okay, remind me. What are these different horizons?
There are 5 horizons, each representing a different level of altitude in our thinking. The first horizon is about your current actions and projects, your ground level day-to-day stuff.
So our to-do lists, our calendar appointments, the immediate tasks at hand.
Exactly. Then we move up to Horizon 2, which is about your areas of responsibility and focus. These are the bigger buckets, the roles you play in life.
Like parent, partner, employee, creator, those kinds of things.
Precisely, it's about recognizing those different hats you wear and making sure you're giving each area appropriate attention. Then we have Horizon 3, which is all about your 1 to 2 year goals. This is where you start thinking about the specific outcomes you want to achieve in the near future.
So this is where we get specific about those aspirations we talked about earlier. What do we want to accomplish in the next year or two? What milestones do we want to hit?
Exactly. And then we go even further out with Horizon 4, which is about your long-term vision for your career and life. We're thinking 5 to 10 years out at this point.
So envisioning our ideal future, where do we see ourselves in 5-10 years? What do we want our lives to look like?
Precisely. And finally, we reach Horizon 5, the highest level of altitude. This is about your life, purpose, and legacy.
Wow, that's deep bars. So we're contemplating our why, our reason for being, the impact we want to make on the world.
Exactly. It's about connecting to something bigger than yourself. What's fascinating here is that by using GTD to manage those lower level horizons, your tasks, your projects, you free up mental space and energy to focus on those higher level aspirations.
So it's not just about getting things done, it's about getting the right things done, the things that truly matter to us.
That's the key. And that's why GTD is such a powerful tool for growth seekers. It helps us achieve clarity and control at all levels, from daily tasks to long-term aspirations. It's about aligning your actions with your purpose and living a more intentional and fulfilling life.
This is so powerful. I'm already starting to see how I can integrate these different horizons into my planning and review process.
Yeah.
But I have a question. How often should we be revisiting these different horizons? It seems like it could be a lot to track.
You're right. It can feel overwhelming if you try to do it all at once. Remember, it's a journey, not a destination. We've already talked about the weekly review for Horizon 1, those day-to-day actions and projects.
Right, so we're checking in with those ground level tasks every week.
Exactly. For Horizon 2, those areas of responsibility, you might do a monthly or quarterly review.
Okay, so we're stepping back to assess those roles we play on a less frequent basis.
Precisely. And for the higher horizons, those bigger picture visions, you might only do a yearly review or even less frequently. The key is to find a rhythm that works for you and ensures you're giving appropriate attention to each level.
This is incredibly helpful. I'm starting to feel like I have a framework, a roadmap for aligning my actions with my goals and purpose. But I have to ask, it all sounds great in theory, but how do we actually achieve that mind-like water state in the midst of all the chaos and demands of modern life?
It's a great question, and it's not a passive state. It's something you cultivate. GTD is the foundation. When you have a trusted system to hold your commitments, your mind can relax. You don't have to constantly try to remember everything.
So it's like freeing up RAM, like giving our brains permission to stop juggling all those mental balls.
Exactly, and that frees up energy and attention to focus on what's truly important in the moment.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. But what about those moments when things feel chaotic, when unexpected challenges arise? How can we maintain that mind-like water state when we're feeling stressed or overwhelmed?
It's about developing a practice when you consistently capture, clarify, and organize. You build trust in your system. Then when those unexpected challenges arise, you can return to your system knowing that you've captured everything, you've clarified your next actions, and you have a plan in place. That knowledge creates a sense of calm and control, even in the midst of chaos.
So it's about training your mind to trust the system, to let go of that constant need to control everything.
Precisely. It's a practice, a journey, and the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. You'll start to notice a shift in your thinking, a sense of calmness and clarity that pervades your work and your life.
This is incredibly insightful. I'm feeling so inspired to embrace this GTD journey and cultivate that mind-like water state. But before we wrap up part 2, I'd love to explore one more concept that I found intriguing in the book, the idea of perspective. David Allen talks about the importance of shifting our perspective to gain clarity and make better decisions. How does that play into GTD?
That's a brilliant observation perspective. It's crucial in GTD, especially when we talk about those higher horizons of focus. It's about stepping back, seeing the bigger picture, and understanding how our actions fit into our larger goals and purpose.
So it's about seeing the forest for the trees.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that those day-to-day tasks, those urgent emails, those demanding projects, they're all part of a larger tapestry, and by shifting our perspective, we can gain a deeper understanding of how those individual threads contribute to the overall design.
I love that analogy. It's like zooming out on a map to get a better sense of where we are and where we're going. So how do we practically shift our perspective in a way that supports our GTD practice?
There are several ways. One is through the weekly review. Remember, we talked about how the weekly review is a time to get clear, get current, and get creative. It's also a chance to step back and gain perspective.
So it's not just about reviewing our to-do lists. It's about reconnecting with our larger goals and purpose.
Exactly. By taking that time to reflect, to ask ourselves, am I on the right track? Are my actions aligned with my goals? Do I need to adjust my course? We're shifting our perspective and ensuring that we're moving in the direction we want to go.
That's so powerful. It's like having a built-in compass to guide us on our journey. But what about those moments when we're feeling stuck or overwhelmed, when we can't see the forest for the trees? How can we shift our perspective in those moments?
That's where the horizons of focus come into play, when you feel overwhelmed by the details. It can be helpful to move up a level. Think about your areas of responsibility, your 1 to 2 year goals, your long-term vision. By focusing on those higher level aspirations, you can regain a sense of perspective and clarity.
So it's like zooming out on the map, getting a wider view to remind ourselves of the bigger picture.
Exactly. It's about reconnecting with your why, your purpose. Why are you doing what you're doing? What impact do you want to make? By reminding yourself of those bigger goals, you can find renewed motivation and clarity even in the midst of challenges.
This is incredibly helpful. I'm starting to see how perspective is an essential part of GTD. It's not just about managing tasks, it's about aligning our actions with our purpose and living a more intentional and fulfilling life.
That's the heart of it. And the beauty is it's a practice, a journey. As you continue to implement GTD, you'll naturally develop a greater sense of perspective and clarity. You'll start to see the connections between your actions and your goals, and you'll be able to navigate the complexities of modern life with a greater sense of ease and purpose.
This has been an incredible conversation. I'm feeling so inspired to embrace this GTD journey and cultivate that mind-like-water state. But before we wrap up part 2, I want to make sure we cover one more crucial aspect of GTD, the power of the next action. We've touched on it throughout a conversation, but I think it deserves its own spotlight.
You're absolutely right. The next action is the cornerstone of GTD. It's the bridge between intention and action, the key to unlocking productivity and overcoming procrastination.
Okay, I'm ready to unlock that power. Let's dive in. Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into getting things done, and I'm really excited to unlock this power of the next action.
Yeah, it's such a simple concept, but it's incredibly powerful. When you focus on that one concrete step, you're really cutting through the mental clutter and you eliminate that overwhelm. That often leads to procrastination.
Yeah, I think a lot of us, myself included, we tend to get stuck in the planning phase. We overthink, we analyze, we create these elaborate to-do lists, but then we don't always take action.
You're right, that's a really common trap. And it's often because we're not really clear on what that next physical action actually is. So we might have a big goal in mind, like launch a business, but that's not really an action, it's an outcome. So to move forward, we need to define that first concrete step.
Okay, so instead of launch a business, my next action might be research business licenses or brainstorm some business names.
Exactly. By defining that next action, you've created a clear path forward. You're no longer stuck in that analysis paralysis, you're taking action. And that action creates momentum, which leads to more action, and so on.
Like that saying, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. But what about those times when even that first step feels overwhelming? What if I know what the next action is, but I still can't seem to get myself to do it?
Yeah, that's where the 2-minute rule can be really helpful. If you can complete that next action in 2 minutes or less, just do it right now.
So if my next action is send an email, make a phone call, schedule an appointment, I should just go ahead and do it.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is how this simple rule, it really shifts your mindset. You're no longer delaying those small tasks. You're proactively tackling them. It's a small win, but it creates a sense of momentum.
I can definitely see how that would make a big difference. By getting those small wins, we build confidence and create that positive momentum. But what about tasks that can't be completed in 2 minutes? What if the next action is something bigger, something that requires more time and energy?
Yeah, in those cases, it's important to actually schedule those tasks. Block out time on your calendar and really focus on them. But even then, remember the power of the next action. So if your scheduled task is write a blog post, ask yourself, what's the next action within that task?
So it could be something like outline the post, or
Yeah.
research relevant articles.
Exactly. By breaking down those larger tasks into those smaller, more manageable actions, you make them feel much less daunting and much more achievable.
This is so helpful. I'm starting to see how that next action is really the key
Yeah.
to unlocking productivity and overcoming that procrastination. But there's one more piece of the puzzle I'm curious about. It's the concept of unnatural planning that we touched on earlier. How does that relate to this power of the next action?
That's a great question. So unnatural planning, remember, is about taking those intuitive planning processes we all have and making them more deliberate and more systematic. And one of the key benefits of unnatural planning is that it really forces us to define those next actions.
So by going through that 5-phase process, the purpose, the principles, the vision outcome, brainstorming, and organizing, we naturally identify those concrete steps that need to be taken.
Precisely. And by defining those next actions up front, we're creating that clear roadmap for achieving our goals. We're no longer just reacting to the demands of the moment. We're proactively moving towards our desired outcomes.
It's like having a blueprint for success. But I have a question. What happens when things change? Life happens. What if we encounter unexpected challenges or roadblocks? Does that derail the entire plan?
That's the beauty of GTD. It's a flexible system. It's designed to adapt to the ever-changing landscape of life. So remember that weekly review we talked about. That's your opportunity to adjust your course, revise your plans, and redefine your next actions based on your current reality.
So it's not about rigidly sticking to a plan. It's about being adaptable and responsive to change.
Exactly. And that's what allows us to maintain that mind-like water state. We're not clinging to some rigid expectations. We're flowing with the current, adjusting our course as needed.
This has been an incredible conversation. I'm feeling so inspired to embrace this GTD journey and really cultivate that calm, clear, and responsive mindset. I know I'm not the only one out there who struggles with overwhelm, procrastination, and that feeling of being pulled in a million different directions. This conversation has given me so much hope and a clear path forward.
Absolutely. And remember, GTD is a journey, not a destination. It's a practice, a continual process of refining and evolving. So experiment with these principles, find what works for you, and enjoy the journey.
This has been an incredible deep dive into getting things done. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. For all you growth seekers out there, I highly encourage you to check out this book and see how it can help you unlock your full potential. And don't forget to subscribe to the Limitless Man podcast for more deep dives like this one into all the tools and strategies that can help you become the best version of yourself. Be sure to leave your comments, questions, or maybe some things that you're struggling with. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. And please share it with your family, your friends, or anyone who you think might benefit. Until next time, be the best version of yourself.